Hi, welcome back to the 1 in 20 show. I'm your host, Evan Rogers, and today I'm joined by Stephen Whelan.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
What an impressive setup you have.
Yeah, just a little room, we make it work. Thanks for being on. It's really cool to keep having people that are affirming the arts and, adults even that come on and are able to share about how to monetize that work, whether it be in teaching or, in acting or whatever it is. And I wanted to kind of start because you're, the teacher at Valencia for theater, which is
Valencia
very neat.
High School, yep, in Valencia.
Yep. And I wanted to kind of, set the whole thing that we're going to talk about now.
Sounds good.
With your time in college and your training with all of your Shakespeare work that you did as well. Mm-hmm. How did that all build you into a brand or build your package to be able to then teach as you kind of matured?
Well, I went to Edison High School in Huntington Beach, and I just definitely have to give a shout out to my theater arts teacher, Terrence Giannoni, also known as Terry. We called him Mr. G. And he was just this incredibly cultured guy from New York who went to NYU, and he was a fencing athlete. And I happened to have him as a really troubled freshman who I had all kinds of problems in my life. My grandfather passed away. I found him dead, and it was kind of a tough freshman year. I was just a wreck. And he was just this really great teacher, always really kind. And by the next year, as a sophomore, I was trying to take a traffic and safety course, and it wasn't available. It was impacted. So they said, what other elective would you like to take? And I said, well, what do you got? And they said, well, there's theater. And I'm like, I always thought that might be kind of fun. Well, who's teaching it? And I saw his name, Giannoni, because he was only an English teacher, and they gave him theater. And because of that, I signed up. And I got the bug just really, really early on. And we did 2 plays a year, and he was just incredibly nurturing and amazing. And back then he had us doing acting technique. We were doing Uta Hagen exercises back when I was 16 years old. And kids laugh at me today when I bring up her name because I do it so frequently. But it started for me in high school. And then I realized I wanted to be an actor. And so I had a couple of options. I was really wanting to go to NYU, but I didn't have the classes for it. I had the GPA, but I didn't really there were a couple of classes I needed to take, and I was just not really willing to put in the time. And it was a big struggle to do like the math and the science. So I settled on Cal State University Long Beach, which was 16 miles from my home in Huntington Beach, Long Beach right off of PCH. And a friend of mine, Tom Fawn, one of my best friends, he actually went the year before. He loved it. I followed in his footsteps. The following year, my soon-to-be or later wife, she was there as well, 1 year behind me. So it was Cal State Long Beach is where it started for me. So
awesome.
Yeah, and I got a great education. When I first started, it was $130 a month, a semester.
Oh.
$130 a semester for tuition.
Wow.
And by the time I left, it was like triple that. But still, it was just really cheap, and I stayed for 5 years. I got, I think the people that made the biggest impression on me were the ones that were kind of like the method-based teachers. A man named Matt Reitz. He was kind of a disciple of Lee Strasberg, and he did Uta Hagen exercises as well. So I was learning about how to bring some of my own life to the roles that I was playing, and trying to use effective memory and emotional recall, substitutions, all of those things that actors oftentimes talk about, and had just really great directors. There was a director by the name of Michael Lyman, who really impressed on me that actors are a dime a dozen, but a good director is very unique. So I always kind of kept that in my mind.
Yeah.
And I think I got an overall, just across the board, great education. And prior to the interview today, we talked a little bit about Shakespeare and how that was kind of the cornerstone of the school as well. And for 3 years in a row, we had the Royal Shakespeare Company come to our school. Patrick Stewart came 2 years in a row. We did workshops, and it was very inspiring. And through Matt Wrights, he taught us all about Shakespearean scansion and iambic pentameter, and all these things have kind of stuck with me today that I bring into the classroom when I teach my Shakespeare class and all that. So so that's kind of the genesis of it, the beginning of it. So that's kind of college and high school, and so I got my bachelor's degree in theater arts. And I guess I did enough directing that they gave me on my diploma, for directing and for acting.
Yeah, amazing. And that's so cool because, then we've had on Christian Guerrero
yep.
and Stephen Schmidt, who both were students of yours, as well as Ethan Corbett, and many others. And, you've been name dropped a lot, which is funny.
Cool.
We keep bringing you up, but I think they've learned from your training, and they've also specifically noted you being the inspiration for them to try multiple things. With Christian at Chapman, he specifically said he wanted to try acting and then also directing and film, and how he got to do that at Dodge College.
Right.
I wanted to kind of ask you how you feel. This kind of just came to me as you were sharing.
Sure.
But how do you feel that acting and directing, because you mentioned both of those, how do you feel that they've made you more of a confident individual to be able to then teach? Because you seem like you carry yourself just very well as a person already, just meeting you. But
I appreciate that.
Confidence is a big thing. And my audience is a lot younger, and that's something that we chat about a lot, trying to figure out, well, how do you package yourself to be confident in yourself to then be able to do the art you want to do and monetize that. So
that is a very important thing. Yeah. And this idea that you mentioned monetization, when I finished Cal State Long Beach with a degree, the last thing I really felt equipped to do is to go pursue a career as an actor. And that was one of the unfortunate things about the program, is that there was no showcase to show your work to potential agents and managers and casting directors. And there was really no class. I think there was like one kind of entertainment related class. But yeah, we pretty much, all of us, we'd graduate and be like, okay, now what do we do? And for the most part, it was, okay, for me, it was get in another acting class straight out of college. And I did. And I was so happy I did, because I think by doing that, that's really what cemented me wanting to be a teacher of acting and a director. I studied with a guy by the name of Michael Holmes. He's an amazing teacher. Uta Hagen technique to the core. And he had a banner ad in what's now called Backstage West. Back then was called Dramalog. And the banner ad said, Uta Hagen recommends Michael Holmes. And the little that I knew about Uta Hagen, having read her famous book, Respect for Acting, I really looked up to that way of training, of kind of a basic technique. So I studied with him, and I studied with him for 2 years straight. And after that, to kind of save money, he allowed me to be his assistant. And he even allowed me to teach a couple of his classes when sometimes he would go away. Yeah. And for me, that's kind of what was like, yeah, I really like the process of acting. And I want to be an actor myself, but that's a tough biz. And, the rejection part of it was pretty heavy duty early on. And I think I probably lost my ambition for being a professional actor probably very early on. But I still consider myself an actor. I haven't done anything necessarily professionally recently, and I haven't done a lot professionally. But I consider just the craft of acting to be the art form that really is great at expressing, me, and I like to go back to it from time to time. I think as I get older, it gets a lot harder to do. I think the memorization is an issue. But yeah, I still enjoy the process, and I definitely look to that experience in Michael Holmes' classes as something that kind of set me up for what I'm doing now, which is, just I really like to work on scenes. I like to get to the bottom of, what a moment is about, and what a character is about, and what the theme of the play is, and the action of the play and the characters. And that's what I try to instill with my kids. And maybe we'll talk a little bit later about, like, I just recently did a class over the summer where I had some alumni come back, and it was a really great experience to have people come back that have more life experience, and it just makes them a much better actor. And I just really feel actors are about tapping into who you are, and about understanding self. And that's a lot of what we do in, like, theater 2 and theater 3 when it comes to exercises. I want people to understand who they are so they can then apply it to the characters that they play.
And what a blessing. I mean, that, to me, what you just said is a nutshell of, I think what your students have exude. And we've seen that with some of the people that have been on that you've trained. And I know that you would say that your training that you got, that you now give, came from all the stuff that you learned, right? But I was going to say specifically, Valencia has such a track record. Valencia High School, for those of you who don't know, you guys have been very successful in D-Task and Fullerton and different competitions through the years, and your shows are amazing, and you've pumped out wonderful talent that now, even in a small way, I know a good on, I could count on my fingers the people who've gone off to do great things, whether or not they're huge, it doesn't matter if it's Broadway, at least they've done these big things.
Yeah.
And I think something that's huge is we, as a younger generation, we want to be taken seriously, at least the people in the arts who are working for it. And after directing that cabaret that I did this summer, I've mentioned that on the show multiple times, having people like Abby Thomas, Justin Parrish, my brother, and many others that I know you've gotten to work with as well or see, it's so interesting to me how much they want to succeed and be good at what they want to do.
Right.
And I don't ever remember seeing that growing up, because we grew up in Burbank, and we never had the opportunity to just try the arts like as available as it is out here.
Right.
What have you seen from your students as far as work ethic, and why do you think the program continues to, I mean, you probably wouldn't directly say this, but continues to succeed? Because in reality, Valencia does do incredible stuff.
Yeah, I mean, as do a lot of the schools in this area. I think Santa Clarita is known for, just there's a lot of support for the arts up here, even though sometimes we're not given that kind of credit, when it comes to, football over, and basketball and things like that kind of upstage the arts from time to time. But there's just so many hundreds of kids that are involved in the arts up here, and that's great. And and I share that with my cohorts in the Hart District, Saugus and Canyon and Golden Valley and Hart and West Ranch, and who am I forgetting?
No, I think you got them all.
Okay. They're all just, I know about all of those programs, and I know how dedicated all of those teachers are. And I think now for me, with maybe the limited time that I have left in my career as a high school teacher, I think one of the things I'd really like to do is to push more, the career aspect of it. Because in the past, I look first as like, okay, I'm there as a teacher, I'm doing a job, I'm there to educate, they're getting their fine arts credit, and that's really important that they be a well-rounded person. But then I really view it as an enrichment, right? That they're going to get something out of it. They're going to learn something about themselves. They're going to think outside the box. They're going to, they're going to embrace, that feeling, those butterflies that they get, those nerves that happen when they have to perform in front of an audience, and they're going to learn from themselves about that. And they'll then be able to parlay that into a workplace, job experience, working in a church group or a camp or you name it, something that they're going to, get in touch with in my class, they're going to be able to use in their real life. And I always tell parents that on like back to school night, if your child gets only one thing from me, and that's being a better communicator and having a little more confidence, then I feel like I've done my job. But beyond that, theater 2, theater 3, we want these kids to, succeed as, I like to use the word craft persons, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of artists, because artists are a little pretentious, like to immediately jump and say, oh, I'm an artist.
Right.
And as an actor, maybe that's up to speculation. Are you really an artist, or are you more an interpreter? Are you taking the words of the text and you're interpreting in a particular way? And it is kind of like art, but it's really about craft. And it's really about breaking down the script and what's the intention of the writer and what's the thematic statement that the writer's trying to bring across, and what is the director trying to say with the play. And there's so many different elements to it that I really view it as a craft. So that's kind of something that I'm really going to be pushing, is just trying to get these kids to think college, get into college, try to get in the best college that they can, and what could be beyond college for them. And I'm starting to see some of these kids really, they're starting to really take off. They're starting to think about their careers and how to pursue it as a career. And you don't have to have a college degree for it. And that's one of the main realities. And I've told many of my kids that. Well, if you want to be an actor, maybe you should take a year off from college. Maybe you should take 2 years off from college. That $45,000 you're going to pay in tuition, why don't you get a loan from your parents for $10,000 and get some really good headshots, take some amazing acting classes, get in. Probably the best thing an actor could do is get in those casting director workshops where you meet the casting directors and you work, face to face with them, and they'll remember you for the most part if you make an impression, of course. So there are many different ways to pursue it, but I would say ultimately I want them to get that college degree. It'd be nice, the BFA is something that gets pushed a lot because it's a professional degree for actors, but I think the BA is very valid because you could teach with it. And if I didn't have the BA, when I tried to be a teacher, I'd have to make up a bunch of classes that I didn't take because I wouldn't get the built-in liberal arts degree. So I feel like Cal State Long Beach in particular gave me a very good education for that, because the Cal States are meant to be teaching colleges. That's how they started. And so to this day, and I looked this up on U.S. News and World Report, they have Cal State Long Beach listed in the top 10. I think they're in the number 9 school in the nation for undergrad for theater arts.
Awesome.
Which
wow.
I was really happy to see that.
Yeah. I see a bunch of lists now.
Yeah,
they all change.
We were on the same list as the top school was a school that I always recommend kids look at, which is funny. They offer a BA instead of a BFA. Is oh my God, I'm blanking on it.
Elon?
It's in Manhattan. They're known
Marymount?
No, it's not Marymount, but they're known for Fordham.
Fordham. Yeah. Okay.
Fordham. Fordham offers a BA. I don't think they have a BFA. And
wow.
And they were listed number 1. And to be on the same list as Fordham, I thought was a pretty cool thing to say, hey, I'm alumni of, a school that's on the top 10, same list as Fordham.
If that doesn't, you're like, does that give you any legitimacy now?
When I lived in New York, I used to walk to go to the gym. I'd go by Lincoln Center and go by Fordham, and I'd always think, hey, that'd be a pretty awesome school for actors to go to. And I actually know of a couple people that ended up there. And I know one of my kids could have chose Fordham, but she decided to go to Chapman instead. Lily Florzak, who's a fantastic actor, and I know she's going to go. She's going to do all kinds of things. She's very talented, very gifted.
And we've heard that name on the show too. I've been trying to see if I can get her on because I think she'd be great for this.
She's awesome.
But yeah, it's just so, for me, that's encouraging to hear all of that, because like I mentioned, I think these kids genuinely want to succeed.
Yeah.
Even me being 4 or 5 years removed from a lot of my brother's age kids that you're now working with.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And your brother's age kid, you're talking about the juniors that I have right now. And that is a very special class of kids. Those kids are really dedicated. They're hardworking, and they have a lot of experience. The Thomas sisters and Chloe Rodriguez and your brother, and they work with Escape, but they don't limit themselves to just doing those big shows with a lot of those little kids, but people, they're branching out, and like they're doing your show, and I know that Abby just did Spring Awakening as a kind of an equity waiver production down in Hollywood.
Yeah, I know,
which is great.
Amazing.
And I recall talking to Christian Guerrero back in the day when he first had done Mad World at our school, and talking to him about, hey, you should take this in as an equity waiver production, and he did. He was doing it in like black box theaters, and and then it ended up going to a college, and so.
I know. Look what he's doing now. It's amazing. Awesome. The three of those guys. But I'm so proud of Christian specifically. Christian and I keep up a lot now since we met and did that interview a couple months ago. Now, wow, it's been a while. Crazy. But he's been somebody I look up to, as well as a lot of the people that are even 5 years older than me that have been on the show, or just friends that have kind of mentored me. And to see the amount of work ethic, and I think that's key, something that I feel I grow a lot in, because I'm getting my BA right now, kind of like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to realize, like you said, that could lead me, within 8 months, I suddenly have my degree.
Yeah.
And obviously that doesn't qualify me to be able to teach right away, but it kind of does. And it's cool to think of myself, hopefully in the future, not just being in the arts in the way that I would perform or direct or something, but that I could also be an influence in teaching. Right. And something I keep hearing from friends a little older and some adults as well is that they feel like they've learned an immense amount through teaching that they could never have learned through school learning teaching. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And, I see that in your methods, and from what I've heard as well, that it's amazing what now, your students are now going to teach or direct or all this stuff. And they feel that, oh, that's why Whelan told me that all those years ago. Now I know, and now I can put that to practice. It sounds to me like you structure very practically based, which is so exciting, because there are so few people in the arts that do that. And I think it's because people think, I don't know, go and read a book and then, but the people that I've grown from the most are people who have practically instituted knowledge. Yeah. How do you view, I always talk about this, but how do you view like practical knowledge, hands-on and learning and getting out there practicing, versus book knowledge? Do you have them weigh them on a scale? Is it, I know you're more practical. But
today, trying to get kids to read is difficult. I will say, though, for myself as a person of the craft, reading really opened up my world. I started as a junior in high school. On Friday nights when my friends would be out partying, I'd be home reading James Dean biographies and Humphrey Bogart and Montgomery Clift and Marlon Brando. And that's how I learned a lot about the whole, the career part and, the personality behind that, that actor that I admire so greatly. In the days before we even had VCRs, I'd stay up till 3 a.m. watching what they used to call the $1 Million Movie. And it would usually be some old black and white Humphrey Bogart movie, or, Montgomery Clift. I'm not sure if you ever heard of him.
Yeah, I do know who he is.
But yeah, I was just greatly inspired by like the older generation of actors, and just reading about them, and the method acting that James Dean would practice, and Marlon Brando, I just found very inspiring and very creative. And it was something that I always wanted to do. And so that's what I looked for when I was looking for, acting teachers, really focusing on that, on the technique. And, people can write a lot about it, but you're not going to get anything out of it unless you really get up on your feet and you do it. And I've been exposed to many different styles of, the craft acting. And I think kind of a recent one for me, it just 6-7 years ago, physical theater. It's kind of it's kind of a discipline in and of itself. It is not grounded in Stanislavski necessarily. It's grounded just in, hey, get up on your feet, start throwing a stick around, physicalize this moment. How can you make things physical? And because physicality is a must for the theater, and if you're going to create these complex and compelling characters, you have to have a defined physicality, and I think that's one of the things I really impress upon my kids. I try to teach them blocking. I try to teach them about what a physical action is and how to pursue your objective and how you go about that. And that to me is the key to all acting, is to define, how your super objective as a character feeds into the theme of the play, and then how each and every scene, what is your main objective and what are you going for in order to get that overall objective. And if you don't have an objective, then it's over. Like, the audience is going to stop watching. If you get what you want early in the play, then find something new to get. And if there's nothing in the way of what you're doing, then no one cares. But if you create obstacles for yourself and things to do physically in order to overcome them, then you can really create a wonderful, multi-dimensional character. And that's harder to do in film. And of course, I don't have as much experience with it in film, but I kind of the opinion that film acting really has its core in the theater. If you look at all those great actors that have training, they got their training through the theater. And the theater, and when you work on a film or television set, it's really about the medium. Like, you're working just in a different medium, but it's the same acting technique. It's the same as playing in a 320 seat theater, which is the size of our theater. You have to play it a little smaller. You have to find more subtlety. You don't have to reach as much vocally, but it's the same process. It's the same technique. And of course, the more film experience you have, the better a film actor you're going to be. But I think it always goes back to that theater training that you get. So I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah. Like that book, is it more important for the bookish part or the practical part? I think it definitely is a blend of both.
I was just going to say, I think you blended them with that answer, which is perfect, because I think it's more what I try to do with this show, because it's a dual process for me. It's funny because everybody that I have on, I learn from them. So for me, it helps me. But then I try to create a thorough line plot with everybody that I have on, because I know everybody shares that same,
and those,
passion, which is very cool.
It's a 20th century construct, which is, 90% of acting training is based in Stanislavski, who, that Russian director dude that interviewed great actors and asked them, how did you get there? And he just kind of he detailed a list, and then he started teaching it to other actors, and that's how the technique developed for acting, is really through him. But it wasn't as if he invented it. He was just asking people how you got there. And what's great when you talk about bookish, Stanislavski has a whole series of books, and they're all pretty verbose, and they're kind of hard for younger generation to read. That's probably why I prefer reading Uta Hagen, because she makes it a lot more basic. Yeah.
Interesting.
Not as flowery with the prose.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because you also mentioned Lee Strasberg earlier, and my buddy Camden Espino. Does that name ring a bell?
Yeah. He's at NYU, right?
NYU in Lee Strasberg, which is really neat. And he was initially kind of bummed he didn't get into musical theater, but at the same time now he's not, because he was explaining to me earlier in the summer when he came back, he was like, the physicality, he's learning that.
Yeah, Streetcar Named Desire and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and
Right, and he was sharing how those professors at NYU, Noah Azuna, who's also one of my buddies, who's at NYU, they've both said that those teachers are not ruthless, but they're very tough on them, and they want them to know why they do this and why it's important. And I just found that so fascinating to think about the physicality. And Justin Parrish was telling me all about how you started teaching them that. And, even just goofing around, Justin was trying to do that. And I could see it just in him growing. Even, he's not normally a singer, and that's the cool thing is this summer in our cabaret he got to try that.
Sure.
But you could tell he was trying to take those things that he was learning. We did Your Fault from Into the Woods, so he was trying to be I had blocked it very chaotically, and I was like, you have to put your whole self into this,
right.
Otherwise it doesn't look real, doesn't look believable, especially in a cabaret format where you don't see what happened prior to that. There's no scene that explains it. And I just find that so fascinating about acting and how that can transcend different genres, like you mentioned.
Sure.
Especially in
film. And as a young
film.
actor, Justin in particular has, he's very smart, and he's really good at following his instincts and being in the moment. And I think those are things that you absolutely have to have before you can be an actor. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big fan of the Meisner technique. I know it's very helpful for most people, but I think the Meisner technique really gets you to try to be in the moment. And I feel like, well, if you can't be in the moment to begin with, then maybe you're not meant to be an actor, because that's what you have. That basic communication is just essential. And they do so many technique exercises that try to get you to be spontaneous and in the moment. And I feel like sometimes there's a little bit too much emphasis on that. I think it's that physicality that we talked about, defining the objective and going for what you want, and creating the character through that, and being true to the playwright. I did work in the film industry, and I worked with Anthony Hopkins, and he was a big Uta Hagen disciple. Most people don't know that about him. He claimed that he didn't really learn about acting until he moved to America, and he studied under Uta. And then he himself taught at her studio, HB Studios. But he was, and I tell my kids this all the time, and some of the older generation, they bring this up all the time, but he was famous for saying, in his preparation, what does he do? He reads the script, he reads the script, he reads the script, and then he reads the script, he reads the script, he reads the script. Because we were always told in college that the minimum amount to read the script is 3 times. You read it first as an audience member, enjoying it. You read it a second time to kind of have an eye on what the playwright is trying to say with the play, and maybe a little bit about your character. And then the third time you read it looking for the through line for your character. How does it feed then into in that main theme?
Right.
And it's essential to be, and when you talk about being bookish or whatever, it's essential to read the play and to study the play, and what do other characters say about your character, and what do you say about yourself? And those are all, Stanislavski things, that are just essential to developing your craft.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And
read. I really feel that. Actually, and Gene Hackman gave great advice to acting, which is he'll open a script, he'll read it with like 3 times. How am I like the character? And reread. And then read it 3 more times. How am I different from the character? And kind of devise a list, and look for those specific things. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and in a way we mentioned it earlier, but I feel that so much of acting, and why I think it's such a beautiful thing, whether or not you end up making industry,
right,
is the fact that you do learn to be a better version of yourself, because then you understand yourself through the characters, which inherently could not be anything like you.
Yeah.
And for me, I did 7 shows acting and singing, and that's all I needed. Honestly, I haven't done a show since. I will want to eventually, but once college hit and stuff, I just didn't have the same time to do that, because studying communications and doing a lot of film stuff. But I always know who I am on the inside now.
Right.
Because I went out there on that stage when I was 15, 16, and had an experience I could never forget about. And I suddenly realized all the prep I made for that character in that 1-2 scene moment. That's all I had.
Right.
But I did remember getting out there and being like I'm so prepped, and I'm glad I'm prepped. And for some reason, those principles then extended to the rest of my life now, in preparation, and in my view of the arts. And, this is not to come from a point of affirmation. I'm not trying to say it that way. But I think for a lot of the kids that you get to mentor and train and teach, that they're getting that from you, but it's also self-discovery, like you mentioned. They're finding it out for themselves.
Yeah.
All a part of growing up, I think. And, trying to pick at all kinds of different things.
And
right?
what you're saying is a quote from Shakespeare, comes from Hamlet, where Polonius says to his son Laertes, "To thine own self be true." And I think Shakespeare is one of the best advice givers when it comes to acting, because in Hamlet, there's that famous advice to the player speech where he says, "Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue." And then he goes through how he wants them to be honest, and how he wants them to be genuine, and he wants them to be like nature and believable and not big and broad and overblown. And a lot of people have a misconception about Elizabethan acting, is that it was like this big, like unrealistic style. And the theaters actually were quite intimate. And, you could get caught at acting if you're too big.
Sure. Yeah.
But sometimes like I had an actor last year who I just adore. He's such a pro, Joe DeFreitas, who you've probably heard about. And Joe he never shied away from playing full front to the audience. He never shied away from day one in rehearsals being able to bounce his voice off the back of the theater. And those are things you have to admire. Because when people just put it out there. But then also you do have to adhere to keeping it real and making the moment come alive and making people believe. And I always try to teach my actors that. It's like make believe is the process that you want the audience to experience. You want to make them believe. And you have to approach acting not like it's pretend, but make believe. Make yourself believe that you are this person in this role. That's you. And it could be completely opposite who you are, but it still could be a part of you. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Sure. So,
well, that's great. That's really just awesome to hear, and an encouragement, I think, too, to me and to everybody as they're trying to find themselves, especially being in the most formative years, 13 to 21 or so. Maybe even 25, you might argue as well, but I haven't got there yet. But it is cool to think that there's hope and there's a lot of growth that you can achieve through the arts, and through studying and all that stuff.
My favorite teacher of acting, Michael Holmes, he used to always say he never knew of anyone that didn't make it, that stuck with it, that tried hard enough. Everyone will make it to a degree. If you have talent, and if you have a little chutzpah, and if you don't give up, there will be a payoff eventually. And I'm starting to see that with some of my kids who are recent graduates from college. One who just booked a role in Chicago, Cameron Abbasian. I'm very proud of him.
Wow.
He booked one of those. It's a SVU or one. I forget the names of all these shows. And then I have another kid from the same class of 2012, who booked a film that's shooting in Switzerland for 6 weeks, and he's loving it, and then I'm trying to keep up with as many kids as possible. I have never really pushed the whole career thing because it could. Yeah, it could be a lot of heartache. But my feeling is you're always an actor. Just because you're not acting doesn't mean you're not an actor. Just because you're not getting paid to do it doesn't mean you're not an actor. And Uta Hagen talks about that in her book. She says, somebody said to her once when she was doing a one-person show, they said, "Oh, too bad you're not making money doing this." She goes, "Well, what difference does that make? It's something I want to do because I'm an actor and I'm expressing myself." And so that's an advice I would give to, all of the people that love acting. If you love it, continue to do it. If you have to take a full-time job on the side to stay alive, then do it. But that doesn't mean you have to give up being an actor, because, hey, I'm 56. I've taught at the Heart District for 19 years. Eventually I will retire, but that doesn't mean I'm going to just go into my grave, God willing. I will want to act. And I do from time to time. I do shows at COC. I've done, I did the Santa Clarita Shakespeare, and sometimes I'll even do a little guest appearance in my own plays at Valencia, because I really enjoy it. I find it really nerve-wracking, and I really probably care too much about how I'm perceived, but that's kind of good because that keeps you sharp, and you should care about what you do. And I always tell my kids, oh, you're nervous? Well, that's because you care. Because you care about how you're going to be perceived. You care about the work that you're doing. It's okay to be nervous. You just got to channel it and also breathe. And that should help. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Well, all the advice you've given has been great, and just to chat with you has been awesome. We're already around 40 minutes, which is crazy how fast that goes.
Wow. Okay.
I'm sure it could be a lot
talk
longer.
way too much.
No, it's all good stuff, and it's very valuable. And I think the more that people hear this stuff over and over and over and over again through hopefully the show, if they watch, it's just cool for everybody to just know that they're not in one boat by themselves.
Fantastic.
That there's so many people.
Yes.
I wanted to give you a second if you wanted to do any little promotional thing to this camera about future, like even with Valencia, or anything that you would like for your audience.
Well, so I think it's important to pursue acting as a craft, and which hopefully would also turn into a career. I don't necessarily have anything specifically to promote right this second, but we are doing DTASC, which is Drama Teachers Association of Southern California. It's not necessarily open to the public, but it will be at Canyon High School this year. It's an event that I really love. I've actually taken a position with them as the executive vice president, and so we're doing that as we always do. We have a show coming up November 14th through the 16th called The Bow Stratagem, which is a restoration comedy. And I'm also teaching a class at the Main in Newhall. I did it over the summer, and I have another session coming up, this time actually through the city. So if you want to look up through Parks and Rec, they have a schedule for I believe it's the winter session, and it's January and February and maybe the earliest part of March. I think it's a 6-week course, and looking for actors ages 17 and above. It's mostly an adult acting class, and so if you're interested in anything that you've listened to today, and I'd love to see you check the class out. And
Wonderful.
Thanks for having me. I guess I talked too much and we're out of time.
No, it's
otherwise
okay.
I'd have more to say.
It's okay. We had a couple episodes go over an hour, and it's really more for me in post. I just don't like editing that much. But no, it's always good. It's always good to have more. But I think what we said was a nice, concise little clip. Really, I mean, it'll be gone in an instant once people watch it. But the art lives on. So
I definitely do love to drop names. So I did want to talk a little bit about Orange County High School of the Arts and
Go for it.
my involvement with them, and now there's some really well-known people that came out of that program: Krista Rodriguez and Elisa Vanderpool and Stephanie J. Block and Grace McLean. They're all people that I've worked with as students, and to see them take off now is really amazing, and it's it makes me feel good about my involvement and how you can inspire people to do things. And I really want to make that happen, as an outcropping from Valencia High School, and I think that's starting to happen more and more. Many of my kids are getting into Cal Arts and to Carnegie Mellon and Purchase. We've got a really good reputation with Purchase. I think we've gotten 6 kids in the Purchase program.
Wonderful. Wow.
And I just I'd like to be able to see that continue. And so it's been, Santa Clarita sometimes is known as a cultural graveyard, but I do believe there's a lot of really good things going on out here, and
absolutely
a lot of things at the high school level. We're collaborating with COC and other entities. So
wonderful.
But thank you for having me and for sponsoring the many guests that you've had in the past.
Absolutely.
Shows.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. It's been really a pleasure to have you on, and to have so many great people on. And there's a lot coming your way, which is part of our initiative to just keep pushing forward and, getting this audience acclimated to the amount of people out here that are passionate for the arts in all kinds of facets and ways. And if you want to follow along with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, we're at 1 in 20 Show. We're very thankful for you guys supporting. It's growing every day, and there's lots of things that, again, I cannot tell you, but you might know by now. I don't know. But we're very excited for how it's growing and the people we're interacting with. And thank you for supporting the mission and the drive of the show.